I recently watched a great tutorial on Vectric's YouTube channel of Becky making a decorative button. The tutorial inspired me to have a go at making a little tutorial on a button coaster that I used to sell at craft fairs. Originally I designed them to look like racing car wheels, but with so many people saying that they look like buttons, I ended up selling them as oak button coasters. They're really easy to design and machine and make great gifts for family and friends. So here's a quick tutorial on how to make an oak button coaster. On opening up Vectric, I click on Create New File under Startup Task on the left hand side and add all the information needed for the job setup. This is a single-sided project, so single-sided is left highlighted in a check circle. For my job size, everything I work with is always in millimetres, and for my width and height I input 171mm in both boxes, and my reasoning for this is that when I buy my plain oak it's delivered and machined at 171mm in height, so this job actually mirrors the dimensions of the wood. For the thickness I input 22mm. Z0 position for this project is the top of the material surface, so I ensure that that's highlighted correctly and that my XY datum position is bang in the middle. This helps me for when I'm designing my pieces and for marking out and setting up the material on the CNC machine, as all I've got to do is simply find the centre of the piece of square oak that I'm using by drawing two diagonal lines from corner to corner, as you'll see later. I'm not too concerned with the modelling resolution, but I tend to select medium oak. Once I'm happy I hit OK, and now I've got my clean slate to work with on at the correct dimensions and I'm ready to start designing the coaster. The button coaster is going to be 142.5mm in diameter, so I select the Draw Circle tool in Create Vectors and I input X and Y as 0 and diameter as 142.5mm, and clicking Create gives me the desired vector. Now whilst the Draw Circle option is still open, I can also create the other vectors I need for the coaster, as I already know the sizes that I need. Of course, not everyone's coaster is going to be the same size, as people may have different sized glasses, but for me, an inside diameter of 84mm is ideal, so inputting 84mm gives me the next desired vector and it's slowly starting to look more like a button. Now I also want to create another circle vector which is going to assist me when I'm adding text later on. I need the vector to be halfway between the two vectors that I've already placed on the slate. To find the centre vector, I simply take the outside vector figure of 142.5mm, subtract the inner size of the 84mm vector, which gives me a figure of 58.5mm, which is the difference in size of the two vectors. I then divide this figure by 2 to give me a figure of 29.25mm, and add this figure of 29.25mm to the 84mm inner vector, which gives me a new figure of 113.25mm. Inputting this figure into the Draw Circle box now gives me a circular vector which is exactly halfway between the inner and outer vector and gives me somewhere to add my text later on. I close the Draw Circle box and now open up the Draw a Rectangle box. As I'm working from the centre still, I can have the X and Y as 0 and keep the corner type to square, as I'm going to use this square to show me where I need to place circular vectors for the buttonholes. So for the size I'll select 32.75 by 32.75 and click Create, then close this box down. I can now use each of the four corners to help me create 4 individual circle vectors for the buttonholes. To do this I once again open up the Create a Circle vector. I want a 9.5mm diameter buttonhole, so I type in 9.5 into the box, making sure the diameter is highlighted. If I then take my crosshair to the corner of the square, the software detects that I'm on the corner by bringing up a little filled in square icon. And all I have to do then is click the left mouse button and it will add the 9.5mm vector for me. I repeat this on all corners of the square, and now I have my 4 buttonholes, and close down the box and click on the screen so it deselects any vector that I may still have selected. Alternatively, you could just press Escape. If you just wanted a button without any engraved text, then at this point you could simply start adding the necessary toolpaths, but as I'll be adding text there's a little bit more work to do. Now there's a few options here, some are easier than others. If you want to add text with a serif, I think it's called, then if your material isn't quite flat, then sometimes this can show in the serifs not machining evenly. This can be overcome by skimming the surface of the button first, depending on how far out of flat it is. But to keep this project as simple as possible, I'm just going to use the Arial font. So on the left hand side, I open up the Creator text box and I'm going to be using my YouTube channel name Smugwood. And I'm going to be using capital letters to make setting out the font less complicated. I also want the text to be 15mm in height, so in the text box I type in 15mm. I make sure that the true type font is highlighted and have Arial selected. Placement isn't important yet, so all I need to do once I've typed Smugwood into the text box is press close and deselect the text that's appeared by clicking somewhere on the screen or pressing escape. I'm going to be placing the text on the middle curve I placed earlier, so to do this I select the text in a curve icon, which is the icon with ABC written on it in the Create Vectors section on the left hand side. When the dialog box opens, it actually tells me what to do, and that's to select a single line of text and the curve to wrap it to. So I click on the Smugwood text, then holding down the Shift key I click on the middle curve, and when I do so the text automatically wraps to the middle curve vector. There's now a few options needed to get the text looking right. Under text size, maintain text size should be highlighted, or you could get some bizarre looking text effects. The text spacing I leave for now. I then select text position to be on the curve, and this puts it right where I need it. Text alignment will be in the middle and the align to curve should be highlighted, not keep vertical. At this point I can now look at altering the text spacing until I'm happy with how it looks. I sometimes find that no matter what I do I just can't quite get it looking even, so if that ever happens I usually close it down, ungroup the text and adjust the letters manually and then regroup the text. But on this occasion it's fine with just the text on a curve option. And as I'm happy I just close the box down to set the text and escape to deselect. And that's basically all the design work finished. The next step is to create the toolpath. To do this I select the switch to toolpath commands at the top of the screen, which now opens up the toolpath window. At this stage I've saved my file to prevent any upset down the line if my computer crashes. So at this point I'll check my material setup. Pressing set allows me to double check that I've got the correct thickness of material, which is 22mm. XY datum is 00 and Z0 is the material surface. Model position of material I have gap above model set to 0. And my rapid Z gaps above material set at 5mm with a home start position set at X0, Y0 and Z gap above material at 20mm. Of course everyone's got their own preferences for the settings, but these work fine for most of my projects. Now I've double checked the settings, I click OK to bring me back to the toolpath operations. For this project I'm only going to be using two cutters, a 60° V-bit and an 8mm down spiral cutter. I find the down cut gives me a much cleaner finish as I'm not uplifting the wood fibres as I cut through the material, although material removal isn't as efficient, so I do take that into consideration when designing my toolpaths. You may choose a different technique, especially if you're using an upcut spiral. So first of all I'm going to engrave the text and click on the V-carve icon, which opens up a whole host of options. My cutting depth start depth will be 0 as I'm engraving the top of the material and flat depth is left blank. I've already selected my cutter, which is a Wheeldon Tools 60° V-bit cutter. No clearance tools are necessary, so that's left blank, as are the rest of the options as you can see. I've also no need to rename the toolpath, so I'll leave that as it is. I need to click on the text to highlight it and press calculate. The necessary toolpath for the engraving is now complete. Clicking Preview Visible Toolpath shows how it should look when machined. Clicking Close now brings me back to the Toolpath Operations menu. From here I'm going to be using an 8mm down spiral for the rest of the machining toolpaths. First toolpath will be the pocket toolpath to remove the middle portion of the button where the glass or the cup will sit. I prefer this to be quite deep, around 10mm. So I click on the pocket toolpath and set my cut depth at 10mm with the start depth of 0mm. My 8mm cutter is already selected and I'm only taking light passes as the oak can be very tough to cut sometimes, and with the down cut it's not as easy for the extractor to remove the chips. Use large area clearance tool is left unchecked. Clear pocket I have set to raster with a conventional cut and a raster angle of 0. I'll have to check that when the oak is on the CNC machine that the grain is running in the same direction as the raster cut direction to ensure the smoothest cut possible. Everything else I leave unchecked, but you may wish to have different settings that suit your machining tools better. I'll click back to the 2D view, select the inner circle and press Calculate to give me the toolpath for the pocket. I can also preview this by clicking Preview Visible Toolpaths. Now for the ease of the video, I'm going to create just the one toolpath for the buttonholes, but when I come to actually machining it, I'll be using a slightly different method. Because I'm using a downcut spiral, when I'm drilling or removing material from such small holes, there's no place for the wood chips to go, and this can result in a number of problems. So what I like to do is take a few millimetre cuts out of each hole and use a vacuum to remove the chips, and then the cutter will come back and remove a little bit more, and so on until the final depth is achieved. Using an upcut spiral causes less of a problem, but the finish isn't as good, so although it's a bit more hassle setting it up, for me it's worth it for a better finish. But for ease of the tutorial, I'll simply set the down cut to remove the material in one pass so you can see the results in the simulation, and I'll change it later to suit my machine method. So I'll click back on the 2D view and select the 4 button holes, holding down Shift and clicking the left mouse button. I then right click the mouse button and group the vectors. Clicking Close then opens up the toolpath operations, and I'll click once more on the pocket toolpath. I'll leave all the settings the same, but this time I'll set a start depth to 10mm as we've already removed that in the previous operation, and set cut depth to 12mm and press Calculate. And once more I can preview this toolpath by pressing Preview Visible Toolpath. Last but not least is a profile cut. Clicking Close and selecting the 2D tab, I click on the profile toolpath and select the outer vector of the button. Start depth is going to be 0 and cut depth is going to be 22mm. I already have my 8mm cutter selected and need to make sure that I have selected outside on my machine vectors, and I'll be using the conventional cut. I'll leave Separate Last Pass unchecked and select the Add Tabs to Toolpath so the piece doesn't fly away when it's being cut. I add a length of 8mm and a thickness of 6mm and check 3D so it's easier to cut the tabs off when it's finished. I'll click Edit the tabs and select 4 in the Constant Tab section and Add Tabs. Then it's just a case of clicking Close. I've left the Add Ramps to Toolpath unchecked, and again everybody's got their own methods and reasons for different cutting methods, so it's what suits you best really. Project Toolpath onto 3D Model is unchecked, and then I press Calculate and once again I can preview the toolpath. Now I'm happy with that, so I can now click Close and save my toolpaths. I click on the Save Toolpath icon and highlight VCarve, check I've got the correct post processor for my CNC router and click Save Toolpath. I then uncheck VCarve and select the other 3 toolpaths, making sure they're in the correct order. And I'm able to save this as one toolpath as I'm using the same cutter. But before I save the toolpath, I will have to go back and make the changes to the buttonholes toolpath using the method that I mentioned earlier. But once that's done, it's just a case of saving the toolpath and then saving the .tap file to a pen drive ready for machining. So at the CNC I've screwed down a piece of 22mm oak to a sacrificial piece of MDF. It takes just seconds to upload the file to the CNC and it's ready to go. The 60° V-bit cutter is secured into the collar and the centre of the piece all marked up and all X, Y and Z programmed into the machine. The dust shoe goes on and it's ready for engraving. Once engraved, the downcut spiral goes in and the rest of the machining can be finished with just the one cutter. I've also changed my toolpath to the buttonhole cutting so it removes just a few millimetres at a time and moves to the next hole. I can then use a vacuum or an airline to remove any chips that may cause problems with the cutter, but on this occasion everything went quite smooth. Then it's a quick adjustment to the dust shoe and it's ready to cut out the coaster. A quick sand, a pass with a miniature roundover bit and a coating with your favourite oil and it's job done. And here's a finished coaster. There's so many different ways that you can do these depending on how you'd like them to look. The text size, style and placement can be changed. You can have bigger or smaller buttonholes, big coaster, little coaster, options are almost endless. But above all, if you decide to make one, just have fun and perhaps let me know how you got on or even send me a pic. Good luck! Prior to making the videos on YouTube, I worked as a firefighter for nearly 20 years, serving my community and helping to save lives and promote the fire safety message. Unfortunately, an accumulation of many upsetting scenes became too much for my mind to cope with, and after years of failed therapy I was retired from the service on the grounds of ill health and signed off medically from any employment. To keep myself busy, both body and mind, I developed an interest in woodworking and car mechanics, and with already having a hobby in filming and music, I combined my interests and started making videos here on YouTube, filming, editing and composing my own music for my woodworking and car restoration channels Smugwood and Smugwood Mini. Unfortunately, to produce such videos comes at a price, and with minimal funds after being retired from employment, I've turned to Patreon to see if there is additional support out there which could allow me to continue making the woodworking and car restoration videos. In return for support, there are various levels which are explained in more depth at the Patreon link below, but includes the chance to win one of my YouTube projects made throughout the year, and also inclusion into random prize draws open to patrons only. In addition, I'd like to thank everybody who already subscribes to my channels, or watches, comments, likes and shares them, as it all goes to help support my channels, and for that I'm really appreciative. It's my hope that I can continue making the videos for the foreseeable future. Thanks once again for your continued support.